Hey kids, welcome back to our channel and the Catechism for Kids series. Back with me again, Joseph, your host. Do you know someone who needs a miracle? Well, today we meet an amazing saint who helps us with our prayers. So let's begin. Today, September 1st, is the feast of Saint Giles, also called Giles the Hermit. Saint Giles is a popular saint in both the Western and Eastern Christian traditions. He is revered as a patron saint of the disabled, outcasts, and the poor. He is also known as the patron saint of forests and fields, and is invoked for help with the protection of crops and livestock. Saint Giles was born in the 7th century in Athens, Greece. According to legend, he was born into a noble family and was educated in the liberal arts. Later in life, he decided to become a hermit and retreated to a forest near the city of Nimes, in what is now France. He lived in solitude for many years and was known for his piety and miracles. One of the most famous legends associated with Saint Giles is the story of how he was wounded by a hunter. The Legenda Aurea links him with Arles, but finally he withdrew deep into the forest near Nimes, where in the greatest solitude he spent many years, his sole companion being his beloved deer, or red deer, who in some stories sustained him on her milk. Giles ate a Christian vegetarian diet. This retreat was finally discovered by the king's hunters, who had pursued the deer to its place of refuge. An arrow shot at the deer wounded the saint instead, who afterwards became a patron of the physically disabled. The king by legend was Wamba, an anachronistic Visigoth, but must have been a Frank in the original story due to the historical setting. He held the hermit in high esteem for his humility and rejecting all honors save having some disciples. Wamba built him a monastery in his valley, Saint Giles, which Giles placed under the Benedictine rule. He died there in the early part of the 8th century with the highest repute for sanctity and miracles. Saint Giles died in the early 8th century, and his relics were venerated in various places throughout Europe. He was canonized by the Catholic Church in the 9th century, and his feast day is celebrated on September 1st in the Eastern Orthodox Church. He is celebrated on the same day as one of the 14 Holy Helpers, a group of saints who are believed to have interceded in times of plague and other illnesses. There are many churches and monasteries dedicated to Saint Giles throughout Europe, and his name can be found in various place names, such as Saint Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, Scotland. He is often depicted in artwork with a deer or a hind, which is said to have provided him with food while he was living in the forest. In addition to being a popular saint in Christianity, Saint Giles is also revered in other religions and cultures. For example, in Hinduism, he is associated with the god Shiva and is said to have been a yogi who practiced austerities in the forest. In Islam, he is known as Ilyas and is considered a prophet. Saint Giles is a fascinating figure in religious history, known for his piety, miracles, and devotion to a life of solitude. His legacy lives on through the many churches and places named in his honor. The town of Aegidius sprang up around the abbey, allegedly founded by him in the 7th century. That abbey, which was rededicated to him in the 10th century, remained the center of his cult, which was particularly strong in Languedoc, even after a rival body of Saint Giles appeared at Toulouse. His cult spread rapidly far and wide throughout Europe in the Middle Ages, as is witnessed by the churches and monasteries dedicated to him in France, Spain, Germany, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and Great Britain. By the numerous manuscripts in prose and verse commemorating his virtues and miracles, and especially by the vast concourse of pilgrims who from all Europe flocked to his shrine. He was one of the most popular saints in the Middle Ages. In 1562, the relics of the saint were secretly transferred to Toulouse to protect them from the Huguenots, and the level of pilgrimages declined. The restoration of most of the relics to the Abbey of Saint Giles in 1862 and the publicized rediscovery of his former tomb there in 1865 helped the pilgrimages recommence. Saint Giles is the patron saint of people with disabilities and is also invoked as a saint for childhood fears. Convulsions, depression, particularly in Normandy, for example in Urailleville, St. Germain Village, or Bernay, or in Calvados-Guilteux. In medieval art, he is depicted with his symbol, the hind female deer. Its emblem is also an arrow. Giles is one of the 14 Holy Helpers, and the only non-martyr, initially. Invoked as protection against the Black Death. His feast day is the 1st of September. Besides Saint Giles, 19 other cities bear his name. Cities that possess relics of Saint Giles include Saint Giles and many other French cities, Antwerp, Brugge, and Tournai in Belgium, Cologne and Bamberg in Germany, known as Aegidius, Rome and Bologna in Italy, Prague in the Czech Republic, and Esztergom in Hungary. Giles is also the patron saint of Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, where Saint Giles High Kirk is a prominent landmark. He is also the patron saint of Graz, Nuremberg, Osnabrück, Sankt Gilgen, Brunswick, Wallaberg, Saint Giles, Brussels capital region, Saint Gilles-Oise, and Poprad. In 1630, the church of San Aegidio in Trastevere in Rome was dedicated to him, in which since 1968 has housed the lay community of San Aegidio. The centuries-long presence of crusaders, many of them of French origin, left the name of Saint Giles in some locations in the Middle East. Raymond of Saint Giles lent his name to Saint Giles Castle Khalat Saint Giles in Tripoli, Lebanon. Giles of Provence is remembered in the Church of England with a commemoration on the 1st of September. So why is Saint Giles important? First, he shows us how to live a holy life. He didn't need fancy things to feel close to God. All he needed was a pure heart and a desire to follow Jesus. He slept under the open sky, not because he liked sleeping outside, but because he wanted to help others more. And he prayed in the forest, not because he was lonely, but because that's where he could hear God better. Saint Giles teaches us that if we want to feel God's presence in our lives, we must simplify our wants and focus on what's really important, like helping those in need and spending time in prayer. Second, Saint Giles shows us the importance of helping the poor and the sick. He didn't turn away anyone who needed help. Whether they were rich or poor, healthy or sick, he offered them kindness and compassion. Once, while he was collecting herbs for a sick woman, some people made fun of him and said, "Why don't you ask a rich person to get these herbs for you?" But Saint Giles replied, "I am rich because I serve the Lord." He knew that true wealth comes from serving God and helping others. So whenever we see someone in need, we must offer them a helping hand, just like Saint Giles did. Third, Saint Giles teaches us to trust in God's plan for us. He didn't know how or why he would help others, but he knew that God had a purpose for him. So he simply surrendered his will to God and followed his path. Sometimes God may call us to do something we don't understand, but if we trust in him, we will know that everything will be okay. Saint Giles reminds us that living simply, praying humbly, and caring for others brings us closer to God. Remember the words of Jesus, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Matthew 5:2-3. May these words inspire us to follow in the footsteps of Saint Giles and seek God's mercy and help those in need. Wow, you know so much about Saint Giles already. That's all for this episode, kids. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Keep being awesome. See you next time, and God bless you always.